Say the intro. Hola, 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 everybody. Welcome to another episode of Mujer de Éxito, Unbounded, Women of Success Without Limits. And here you are, otra vez, with us. But today is a special episode. Today, I am actually having the amazing opportunity of getting to speak to a Latina book author, children's book author, to kick off Hispanic Heritage Month. And it's amazing. And the thing that's amazing about this, as you're watching us, understand this. I'm in San Diego and she is in the UK. So, without further ado, acuérdense que aquí estamos. This is your podcast where you come to get tips and tricks on how to move your business ahead or how to get started with something that you want. And listen to the stories of someone like Monica, who has actually gone from surviving to thriving. And that's what this is all about. So gracias por estar aquí. I am so happy and so incredibly grateful for you, Monica Mancillas. I found you on social media. So there are special places. And I saw your books. I just want to share with you how I actually reached out to you. So I saw you on Threads, and then I went and I looked you up, and then I looked at all your books on Amazon, and it was like, okay. So I was like, I got to get this young lady in here. I didn't realize that you were in the UK when I actually reached out. You were in the process of moving. But welcome to the Mujer de Éxito Unbounded. Mónica, ¿cómo estás?
Muy bien, gracias a ti. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here. Now, Mónica, would you call yourself an introvert, an extrovert, or an ambivert?
I'd say I'm probably an ambivert.
Okay.
I definitely thrive being around people and especially engaging and speaking with audiences, but I'm one of those people that also has to have an equal amount, if not more, downtime where I'm just alone and decompressing and quiet with my own thoughts.
Yeah, I'm an ambivert as well. And people are like, "Well, hey, you were a teacher or educator and all this." And yeah, but in order for me to be there and be that energizer bunny, I need to shut down. I find that, to put myself back on track, if you will. Monica, let's talk a little bit about, did you always want to be a children's book author? How did that come about?
No, I definitely always wanted to be a writer. I loved writing from the time I was a kid. I remember in school, I was very into school and I loved all subjects, but the writing assignments were always my favorite and the ones that I took the most care with, especially the older I got. And when I went to college, I thought of maybe being a journalist or maybe being, doing something that had to do with writing. But I wound up going to Berkeley, UC Berkeley, where everything is very academic. And I'm also a musician, and I had gone to a school of performing arts. And so I had considered music as well. But the way that the creative industries were taught was very academic and just not for me. So I wound up studying anthropology. But part of the reason I studied anthropology was because I thought, okay, I can travel, I can learn about new cultures, and I can write about my experiences. So I always knew that I wanted to be a writer. And over the years, as a young adult, I took several stabs at writing short stories and writing novels, but I didn't know how to, I was kind of in the writing world. We say you're either a plotter or a pantser. So if you're a plotter, you organize and you do, detailed outlines and you brainstorm a lot and you know what you're going to write and how you're going to write it going in. And I was always a pantser. I would jump in and just write without a plan. And I would get stuck every time because I didn't know where this story was going. So it never occurred to me as a young adult to write children's books. But when I became a mother in my 30s, I all of a sudden started spending a lot of time reading to my own daughter. And there wasn't a lot of reading in my life as a kid. My mom was a single mom for much of my childhood, and we didn't have the money or the time to go to the library or to purchase books. So I had a few books, and as I got older, I would borrow from her bookshelves. But I wasn't a huge reader because books weren't around and accessible. So all of a sudden, it was like reliving my childhood. When my daughter was born, I was able to go to the library and spend hours there, and we would go at least once a week, starting from the time she was about a year old, and we'd just come home with a huge stack of books and read the books. And I had left a career in the music industry and was now a full-time mother and just desperate for a creative outlet. So I started, these ideas for children's books started percolating. And it was in about 2017 that I decided, I don't want to go back to the career I had before. I've always wanted to be a writer. And I'm one of those people that just doesn't believe in doing things part way. So if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it and as well as I can. So I dove in and started, joining critique groups and learning from other writers and reading as much children's literature as I could, and looking for an agent and attending conferences. And it all happened pretty quickly from there. And it felt like something where in previous incarnations of careers, I had a lot of closed doors. This felt very different. Just a lot of doors opening, and a big part of that, I think, was timing. But I think also this was what I was meant to be doing at this particular time in my life. So it felt like it was happening very organically.
How old is your daughter now?
She's 11.
So hence she's going into the middle school age, and so is your writing also going to go into the middle school age?
Yeah, the book I had come out this year, Sing It Like Celia, is my debut middle grade novel. And
Can you show it?
Yeah. So this one, and there's also a Spanish version of this that came out, Cántalo como Celia.
Aww.
So these are both available now. I have another middle grade novel coming out in January through Scholastic called Taco Tuesdays. It's a rom-com and dual point of view, which was fun because I'd never written rom-com before. And then I have another one coming out next year that is a nonfiction book for middle grade readers called Leyendas. And it's a compendium of 60 of biographies of 60 different notable Latina figures. And, the aim of that is to show young readers, especially Latina readers, but all young readers, that there really is, we're not a monolith. There's no one kind of Latina person. We're all different races, sexualities, nationalities, ethnicities, and we can do anything from being a cook to being a dancer to a writer, an astronaut, an activist. And so that one comes out in fall of next year. And then I have another middle grade novel that is unannounced that I'm working on right now that will be coming out either in 2026 or 2027. Not sure yet.
Amazing. I am so, I'm like so proud of you. I'm went through your stuff as I was, kind of finding who you were. And I just was like, okay, she's got this energy about you, have this energy about you that is you're like a servant leader, right? So I looked at that and was like, okay, here's another young lady that I would love to have on my show here. But let me ask you this. Ahora, because a lot of people are always asking me, your guests, you always speak Spanish. I mean, you always speak English, but you speak Spanish, ¿verdad?
Sí, hablo español.
Sí. So, hence why you have your book also in English and also in Spanish. Now, When you began writing and began taking a look at, okay, it's time to get a literary agent.
Mhm.
How did you know you were there? I mean, how did you know that, okay, it's time?
I was not there. I'm going to be really honest. I was very green. In fact, I didn't know. I was telling you that there was this push for own voices stories. I had no idea. And I remember having conversations with my critique partners, worried that I was going to face discrimination or an uphill battle being a Latina with a, Mexican last name and writing these kinds of stories. And I thought that I was going to be relegated to kind of a niche market and that there wasn't going to be a whole lot of interest in it. So I knew absolutely nothing, and I was still really honing my craft as a children's book writer. But as I said, I'm just one of those people that I don't do things halfway. And so I remember attending my first conference through the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, and signing up for the pro session, which is for people like I am now who are agented and published, and because I wanted the opportunity to pitch to a literary agent, knowing very well that I was likely to fail, but I just wanted the experience and I wanted to put myself in, I really believe in telling the universe that you're serious about
Yeah.
what it is that you want in your life, and facing those fears or whatever it is that's inhibiting you and just going for it. So that's what I did. Anytime there was an opportunity to apply for something, I applied for a mentorship through that organization, SEBWI. I won that. Anytime there was an opportunity to get my work in front of an editor or an agent through some kind of contest, I would enter those. So I didn't know I was ready. I wasn't ready. And I was really surprised by the fact that my agent offered representation. I was so new. But and I didn't even know a whole lot about agents and whether or not she was a good agent. I just lucked out, to be honest with you. She turned out to be a fantastic agent, and I took a chance and signed with her. And I kind of learned as I was going.
Mm-hmm.
Threw myself into the fire, as they say.
You went from surviving to thriving. You just kind of did that. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. One of the things that I think I hear from you is you had a fear, but you faced it and you met it head on, which is really important. Now, I've done that with, with I would say like physical things. Like I was deathly afraid of horses, so I went to a stable and I made myself and my kids go in, and we took lessons and became dressage, and English saddle and all that kind of good stuff. Just because I was so deathly afraid of horses that whenever the first time, it was hilarious, but the first time that I came near a horse, the horse shook. And within like a second, I was like 10 miles away from the horse. So, facing your fears is definitely something that you exemplify. You sound like meet it head on. Let me ask you this. What would you say was your biggest challenge in writing your first book?
Oh, I think my biggest challenge with the very first book that I published was this one, Mariana and Her Familia.
Okay.
And to keep it to one thing that was the biggest challenge is tough. As I said, I was really green, and I was still learning how to, because it really is an art writing a picture book. People think, oh, it's easy because it's short form. Most of them are somewhere between 500 and 1,000 words, and there's a different kind of challenge in writing a longer form book and writing a picture book. But part of the thing that's so challenging about writing a picture book is that, first of all, you're writing for the youngest readers. And so you really have to know your voice and know how to connect with those youngest readers. The other thing is that you are trying to convey something, a feeling, a message, a story in very few words. So you really have to get it right. And you have to spend a lot of time writing, rewriting, cutting words, and thinking about the illustrations, because you have to leave room for the illustrator to complement your story. So you don't want to necessarily, for example, say Mariana walked into a brightly lit room. Instead, you're going to want to say what Mariana was feeling as she walked into that room. What was she hearing? What was going through her body in that moment that a young reader can relate to? And leave the illustration of that room and what it looked like and what the people looked like to the illustrator. So it is a skill. I think as a new writer, another thing that it was a challenge for me in those early years was not feeling like I could speak up for myself. So if there was something in my editorial relationship, if my editor suggested something that didn't feel quite right to me, I would go along with it. I would say, okay, I said yes to everything and tried to figure out how to make it something that was palatable to me. Whereas now I'm a bit more comfortable. I was mentioning, I think before we started the podcast, that the novel that I'm currently working on, the first draft that I turned into my editor, as I sat with it, I realized I wasn't happy with it. And part of the reason I wasn't happy with it was because of some suggestions that had been made by others, not by my editor, but by others along the way. And so I went along with those, and it turned the book into something that did not feel authentic and genuine. And so, I am now comfortable bringing that to the table and saying, you know what, I want this book to be the best book it can possibly be. And so I think I need to rewrite this book from the beginning. And so that's what I'm doing now, is rewriting it. And we're both a lot more excited about it. But I think that's really a big challenge in those early stages for any new writer. Is it's such a huge, you feel the privilege of having an agent, of being published, especially if you're being published by one of the big five, and you just kind of want to stay in your lane and not challenge anything.
Yeah. And especially, let me ask you this, especially being Latina, were you finding that you had bigger challenges?
Yeah, there are definitely challenges that I think authors of color and marginalized authors face, that maybe others don't. One of the most challenging things I have found, and this was something that my agent was very straightforward with me about when she signed with me, she said, people are going to expect you to write a certain kind of story, a certain kind of way. In other words, they do put you in a box, this is, and that was part of what happened with this novel, is that I was kind of asked to, not in these words, but it's like you're always expected to make it Latino, whatever that means in their minds. And of course, again, we're not a monolith, and I don't walk through the world. Nobody walks through the world, with only one hat on, going, I'm only experiencing the world as a Latina. I'm only experiencing the world as a Mexican American. I'm only experiencing the world. We're so many things, right? I'm a woman. I'm a mother. I am a Latina who was born in Mexico, but then moved to the United States at a young age. I'm an American. I am now an American living abroad. So, that is the challenge, is knowing that there is this push for diversity. And so, it can be a very positive thing to have publishing invite you to tell stories that are, specifically about the Latina experience. But at the same time, you can sometimes feel constrained by that in the way that you're expected to tell those stories. On top of which, it feels often as though marginalized authors, marginalized creators, I should say, because illustrators would fit into that as well, and editors and publishing professionals don't necessarily get the same level of support or that their white counterparts get. And that can definitely be frustrating. Like you have to work that much. It's the age-old story. You have to work that much harder as a woman or as a person of color or as somebody from the LGBTQ community. You know, you have to work that much harder to be seen and heard, even when you've made it to the big five.
Wow. And when you say the big five, what are those big fives? What's
so I don't even know if it might be the big four now. We always kind of said the big five. So that would include like Penguin Random House, HarperCollins, Macmillan, and I don't know, Simon and Schuster. Yeah, Simon and Schuster. I don't know what's going on with them, to be honest with you. I know they were supposed to be acquired by Penguin. But anyway, it's those like household name publishers that everybody knows.
I call them the old school publishers, but yeah, that's amazing. So you were able to, to move through the, I would say the blocks that, that are put there inadvertently, maybe, or on purpose, who knows? But those are blocks that normally would stop somebody. Right. And they keep going, and all of a sudden it's like they've got a block. Yeah, no. Then they turn around and they go, yeah, no, this wasn't for me. So did you ever come up against something like that where it was like, okay, that's it. That's my sign. I'm not supposed to be doing this. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. I mean, I go through that. I'm going through that now. I joke with my author friends that the worst part of the publishing process or of being an author is publishing, so those early years when I was signed to an agent and I had sold my first book and I was writing and selling other books and the future was unwritten and I could dream of anything and hope for anything. Those were the most joyful years because it was all about the writing and it wasn't about book, sales numbers and trade reviews and all of that, and awards and all those things that once your book is published now, oh my goodness, there are all these expectations. And a book's success is determined within the first few months of publishing. And you really only have that first year when you're considered a front list title for your publisher to support your book. And then once you become backlist, unless you are a bestseller, then the publisher is really not going to do a whole lot because they have to focus on their front list. So it's a grueling, emotionally taxing journey once you're published for every author I know. It doesn't matter what genre, whether they're marginalized creators or not. It's every author I know thinks, almost daily, am I cut out for this? Should I continue? Will I ever get there? And I think most of us, the ones that continue, I think are those that just, you don't have a choice. Like the thought of not writing is not tenable to me. Like I can't, my life would be so sad if I couldn't write. And again, I think of the reason that I'm writing these books in particular, the kids that I'm writing them for, and what I hope, the meaning that I hope these books will have for kids and even the adults who read them. But I go through that kind of crisis almost daily.
Yeah, because in a sense, it's like us, me being a Latina biz coach, right, and having multiple streams of income, and it's like you start with one and then you make it there, but then it's not, it's a roller coaster.
Yeah, well, and the goalpost constantly changes.
Yeah,
it's again, when you sign with an agent, it's amazing. This was your goal. When you sell your first book, amazing. That was the goal. Once you're published, it's again, about sales numbers and awards and trade reviews and school visits and get it, there's so many, the goalpost constantly changes, constantly changes. And the challenging thing is that it's really, really difficult to make enough money to support yourself in publishing. And so the vast majority of authors have a day job. And when you consider the fact that writing books is a full-time job, and not just writing the books, but promoting the books and doing the events and the social media, it's a full-time job. So having a full-time job on top of a full-time job is challenging enough that most creators are going to question at some point whether or not they can or should continue.
Right. And so when you're writing these books, what would you say when somebody says, "Oh, Monica Mancillas, her mission, her overarching mission with her books is," finish the sentence.
I think my overarching mission is to empower young readers by showing them what is universal in the struggles that they go through. So as they're reading one of my stories, I hope that even if they don't share the exact same experience as the characters in my book, that they are seeing some part of their own experiences in themselves in that book, and finding a way through whatever challenges they are facing in their lives by mirroring the characters in the story.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, you're amazing. I'm gonna be buying one of your books real soon so that I can read it. I love reading to kids. One of my favorite things to do as a mom was to read for my kids, and I do my little voices. And my oldest was like, "Mom, you really need to be thinking about being one of those voice actors," because so right now I'm still thinking about it because somebody just asked me to read one of their books, and I was like, yeah, you know what, I'll think about that. But for right now, my podcasting is the way that I'm getting my voice out there. And then working with Latinas, it's so important, right? Because I've always been a champion for the underserved, the underrepresented, and the underprivileged.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's always meant so much to leave a legacy of Latina leaders behind me. And one of the things that I love is getting to meet people like you. It's like you're some people say that I troll, but I don't troll. What I do is I'm looking at the comments and things like that, and then something will turn me to focus on you, for example, and then I go through and I checked your Amazon and checked your website and checked all of this stuff, and it was like, okay, this gal, I need to have her on because she's got a story to tell. Now let me ask you this. We're just a little bit into the personal stage. What personal challenges did you overcome in order to begin to be this writer?
Oh man, where do I begin? Yeah, I mean, I think there were a lot of challenges in my childhood. I mentioned that we moved to the United States when I was 2 years old. My parents divorced shortly after, so I was about 4 years old. My dad moved abroad. He actually moved to England for a few years. My dad was born and raised in Ensenada as well. And he moved to England to do his postdoctoral research when I was a kid for a few years. So I was without my dad during that time. I would come and spend time with him during the summers. But there were subsequent marriages and divorces on both sides. There was a lot. I'd say there was a theme of loss and abandonment that was kind of a recurring theme in my childhood that definitely shows up in my books.
Mm.
And their mental health was also a huge part of my story. Multiple members of my family have had mental health challenges. I have had my own challenges with anxiety and depression. And again, those that the reason that I was so passionate about writing the second book that was published, which is The Worry Balloon, was when I saw my own daughter struggling with anxiety. And during the pandemic, so many kids were struggling with anxiety, separation anxiety from their parents, and all kinds of anxieties. And so I became very passionate about empowering children and giving them what I didn't have as a kid, which was when I was growing up. And I'm sure you would agree with this, that we didn't talk about mental health issues. It was stigmatized. It was something that was, I was told, don't tell people about this, it was secret, it was shameful. And so when I started experiencing anxiety of my own as a young adult, it was a very scary thing. It was like, oh my God, I'm the only one, it makes me crazy or weird that I feel this way. I didn't know that this was like a normal human experience.
Mhm.
Everybody experiences anxiety or depression at some point in their lives, and it's a spectrum, right? All to a different degree. So I really wanted to empower my daughter and other children to, first of all, have the language to talk about it. And then to know that they had some control over that experience, that there are ways that you can manage these challenges that you go through in a healthy way. But in order to write those things, I had to come to a place in my life where I was unafraid of talking about it, of I had to move past that stigma
Mhm.
that I was burdened with for many, many years, of not wanting to share because of how I thought it made other people would look at me, and now I'm so thankful that we live in a different world now where people will put it in their social media handle, their all of their, whatever has made them who they are. They're not ashamed to put that out into the world. And so I think that has been very empowering for me. But I had to be able to, when I wrote this book, I thought, I'm going to need to be able to talk openly about this. And am I okay with that? So, yeah, that was a big step.
So it sounds like in order to write that book, you had to face your inner demons.
Hmm. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I'd
And
say that's true I think that's true of all of my books. I mean, there's so much of me in all of the books. I mean,
uh,
in Mariana and How to Speak in Spanglish are about kids who are in that in between that I was in, where I didn't feel like I was Mexican enough or Latina enough because I didn't speak perfect Spanish. And I was always afraid that I was going to make a mistake, and in the writing of that book, How to Speak in Spanglish in particular, that was the first time that as I started connecting with readers, with
mhm, mhm,
parents, and teachers who said, oh my gosh, I wish they had had this when I was a kid. I felt the same way. I feel so seen, where I felt for the first time like, oh, it's okay. And I'm going to embrace this, and I started actually speaking in Spanglish more,
mhm.
just going back and forth and speaking without the reserve that I had before,
Right.
Um, so
Amazing.
yeah, writing can be very cathartic.
Yeah. That's amazing. I do have, a couple of questions, just in case one of my listeners is wanting to delve into becoming a writer. My experience as an author has been very different, right? Because I didn't do children's book. I do children's coloring book and activity books, but mostly it's self-help, Latinas who boss up. And then prior to that, it was change your energy, change your life, a journey through your personal, because being a 2-time cancer survivor, you're very so much. People ask me, well, what did you do? And it's like, okay, I'm not going to tell you because I promise you won't want to know and you don't want to do it, and because sometimes you just go off the deep end in order to regain your health. But so I was a different kind of writer, but still there's challenges, and and you're what I call a full-time writer. I'm just what I would call a situational writer, based on a situation or whatever. But let me ask you this. What are three steps that you can share in order for somebody to say, okay, Monica said I should do this first and this first and this first, and then, everything will kind of evolve. What would you say?
Well, the first thing is you have to, if you want to be like seriously pursue a career as a writer, you have to write as often as possible. Make a routine of writing. One of the things I had to do, especially because I mentioned I was writing as a new mom, I had to be fiercely protective of my writing time. And in the beginning, I had very little of it. But if somebody tried to schedule something during that time when I was writing, I would say, nope, sorry, I'm writing. And I still do that.
Okay.
So write, don't be that person that writes when inspiration takes you. Because, I used to be that where it was like, oh, I'd write a story once a year, and that was that because, I wasn't inspired. The inspiration will come when you sit down and, make a routine of it. So now my brain starts going into creative mode the second that I sit down at my laptop and open that laptop. It's just like anything else. If you want to get muscular, you go to the gym and you work out. You can't work out once every 6 months or once, whenever you're inspired to, whenever you feel like it. You have to do it every day. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes and the more you'll want to go back to the gym. So establish that routine, write as often as possible. The second thing you have to do is you have to read in the genre that you are trying to write in. So if you want to write a horror book, you've got to read a lot of horror and see what others have done successfully and learn from that and be inspired by that. And I think the third thing you have to do is connect with others who have that same goal as you do. Critique groups are invaluable, especially in those beginning stages. Sharing your work with other readers and with other writers and sharing resources with other writers is extremely helpful. And hearing their stories can also be inspiring, and having to critique someone else makes you better at critiquing your own work.
Good. Those are beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I loved it. So you sit down, you write, and and set aside a time, honor that time, and then reach out and get involved in networking with people that are in your space.
Mm-hmm.
Really important because I know that those are almost the same things when you run a business, but a lot of people, it's just like you're a content creator, as a content creator, I create a lot of content, but I don't share it all because some of it sucks, right?
Yeah.
And so, but I'm there, creating content, whether or not I like it or not. I force myself to sit down and and I just do my content. But you're right. You're right. And I also too, like for me, the podcast is a special time, right? So I do this every Wednesday. So when people ask me for an appointment on Wednesdays, I'll say, sorry, that's my podcast day. Because it takes a while to edit it, to listen to it, to do whatever it is I need to do, add the front and the back of it, and whatever commercial is going through. So very similar, very similar. So I appreciate that. That is amazing. And Let me ask you this, a very personal question. You just moved to the UK. Do you see
Mhm.
yourself being there for a long term?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
At this particular moment in time, that is the goal. Who knows? Because honestly, 5 years ago, I would not have thought that I would be living in the UK. So
Right.
who knows? Um, but who knows where I'll be in 5 years? But I think right now, at this particular moment in time, it's the best place for me and my family to be.
That's great. That's great. Do me a favor before we head out. Show me your books one by one,
Mhm.
and let's take a look at them so that my listeners and watchers can see your book so that they know they've got the right one when they go. And for those of you watching, make sure to hit that bell and subscribe. And her links will be here probably later on today.
Yeah, so this was my first book published in October of 2022, Mariana and Her Familia. The illustrator for this book is the wonderful Erica Meza, who is a Mexicana like me, but coincidentally lives in the UK. I haven't met her in person yet, but I'm hoping to make that happen.
Oh, cool.
My second book was The Worry Balloon, beautifully illustrated by Betty C. Tang, who is a Los Angelino like I was until very recently. And I have had the good fortune of meeting her, and she's a lovely person. She actually was on the long list for the National Book Award, or she was a
Oh,
finalist for the National Book Award last year for her book Parachute Kids,
oh,
which is
how
a
good.
gorgeous graphic novel. Love. Third book was How to Speak in Spanglish, illustrated by Olivia de Castro. And the book that I had come out most recently is called Sing It Like Celia, Cántalo Como Celia en Español. And the cover design is by Mireia Ortega, who also is a picture book creator and does beautiful work.
Amazing, amazing. So let me ask you this. Do you have an author's page on Amazon? Okay, great.
Yeah, I do, on Amazon. And you can find all of my books on my website at monicamancillas.com.
Great, great. And I was just going to ask you that. Where can people find all your goodness?
Yes, monicamancillas.com lists all of my books, my events, podcasts, any information you want to know about me, or if you need to contact me.
Amazing, amazing. Mija, thank you so much for taking the time, because I know that as a writer, I've already encroached on your writing time probably, but
Nope, not at all. It's dark here, so I'm this is my
oh,
my reading, my bedtime.
okay. Well, here in San Diego, it's barely 12:30 in the
Yeah.
afternoon. So we're getting our day started, our afternoon started. Thank you so much.
Thank
Gracias por
you.
estar aquí. I am so incredibly grateful. And guys, make sure that you come back. If you're watching us live, make sure you hit that bell and subscribe so that you never miss a podcast episode. If you're listening to us on the audio version, you can capture all her goodness, like she said, at Monica Mancillas. That's with an N, MAN. A lot of people say Macias, but it's mancillas.com. And as well, on the Coach Marti Angel YouTube channel, you'll get her links. And on the wherever you're listening to it, the show notes will also have the links for her goodness, her good and great books. Thank you. Thank you, mi amor. Gracias por estar aquí. I hope you enjoyed this session we had.
I did. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, mi amor. And let's keep in touch. And yeah, have a good evening. Que duermas con los angelitos.
Gracias.
Thank you, sweetie.
Thank you.